Watch episode 140, Game Wardens on the Ground in Ohio. This is a continuation of our last podcast where you got all the evidence, all the facts, and saw all the evidence in the CJ Alexander buck poaching case. And now we're going to listen to and get interviewed the game wardens that were actually responsible for bringing this case to the court system, to trial, to a negotiated plea, to CJ paying about $40,000 in fines and doing 6 months incarcerated. It's really a great story. It's some great detailed work. It's tedious work. And I think it's really important that every sportsman hears it, hears the work that their game wardens do. And again, if you're in Ohio, be very proud of your game wardens in bringing this case because it's so important to catch poachers because poaching is about money. It's about bragging rights. It's not about feeding your family anymore. We have many other ways to do that. So I hope you enjoy hearing the other side of the case. I think a lot of you probably have listened to podcasts with CJ Alexander talking about this prior to the conviction. But here's the game warden side of things on the Warden's Watch podcast. On this Warden's Watch, we're sitting down with the Ohio Division of Wildlife, and we're going to be having a discussion about the CJ Alexander buck case with the guys that were on the ground and initiated the case and saw the case through and would have ended up testifying in the end if they went to the trial. So today I'm welcoming Isaiah Gifford and Matt Roberts. Did I get that right, guys?
You got it right.
Yep, got it right. So thank you for joining me, and thanks for bringing this case to fruition, to the end. So it's so important. It takes so much time for these cases to go through the process, but it starts with boots on the ground, and it starts with an investigation. So if you guys can take me to that initial day, the start of the investigation.
Well, I mean, so the way it started, we didn't really have hardly any information on it, other than the fact that it started to blow up on social media. People were starting to ask questions about this buck and the legitimacy of it and this and that, and so we just kind of went and just wanted to get the story. We didn't have really any information other than the pictures that we'd seen on social media. So
And that always happens with a big buck, doesn't it? Generally when you get a buck of this magnitude, you're going to end up investigating it just to kind of clear the guy if he did it right.
yeah, we just kind of wanted to get ahead of the rumors that we saw potentially happening, this and that. Whether high fence deer is one of the things that gets thrown out a lot anytime a big deer like that gets shot. So we just kind of wanted to go and dot our I's and cross our T's, basically. So,
and that's pretty common among game wardens, I believe. I mean, when a buck like that, we look at it probably from clearing the air, like you said. So we can definitely say, hey, that was legal, and this is why it was legal, or that was illegal, and so that's pretty common, isn't it?
yeah, so that's just kind of what we wanted to do. So on the 16th of November, I reached out to CJ to see if he'd be willing to, tell me what happened, essentially. So I was able to meet with him at his apartment there. And he brought the buck down and was showing it to me. And, it's a magnificent, piece. So I was looking at it, this and that. So I had him, start telling me the story. And he told me that he killed it on his sister's property. He said he'd never hunted there before. He was borrowing a crossbow from one of his buddies because his that he had earlier in the year had broken. So he told me that he was there up in a climbing tree stand at the corner of the property. It was kind of near a couple ponds and at the edge of a ag field that was on the neighboring property. And he told me that he saw this doe come out and it was working his way, and then he heard this grunt, and he looked over and saw the deer, and eventually the deer worked over towards him. He said it was by this log about 7 yards away from him. So he shot the buck. Believed he made a a bad hit on the deer because the deer kind of hunched up and just kind of walked off. He didn't feel like it was a very fatal hit, so he wanted to just back out and give it some time. So he told me that, and then he told me he reached out to his buddy Corey, who helped him with this deer throughout the case. And so him and Corey the next day went to look in the direction where the deer had gone, and didn't find anything. So they decided that they were going to work from where he shot it, work towards where the deer went. They found a blood on a piece of grass. They were able to recover the arrow from shooting the deer, and eventually they were able to find the deer dead near one of the ponds. So at that point, they were all happy and excited and everything else. So at that point, once he'd finished telling me the story, that he had for the deer, I asked to see if he had a permission slip to be able to hunt out there, this and that. He told me that it was his sister's property, but I just wanted to see if he did have the written permission to be out there, and which he did. So he showed me the written permission that he'd gotten from his sister, and it was dated before the time that he killed the deer on the 9th of November. So at this point, I wanted to just go out to the site and to see if his story lined up with what he had told me. So I asked if he'd be willing to go out and show me where this had happened, and he said he was. So we went out there. I followed him over there, and we got there, and his sister's mom was there, and she didn't know who we were or what we were doing at first. She was kind of like, what's going on type thing. And, I told her I was here with CJ, and at first she didn't recognize him, but then she realized who it was and that sort of thing. And so I could sense a little bit of dislike for CJ from the mother at that point. So we went back. He showed me the tree that he was hunting out of, and it had marks on the tree from where the climbing tree stand was used to, go up the tree. He showed me the log that he said he shot it by, that was like 7 yards from the tree. And then we looked for the blood on the blade of grass that he said that they found, but we were unable to find it. But he took me over to where the deer had died, and we were able to find some blood on the ground right there. I wasn't able to find a gut pile or anything like that. This was probably, the 16th of November, shot it on the 9th.
7 days.
Yeah, 6-7 days, something like that. So the gut pile wasn't there, but we were able to find some blood. At this point, everything he was saying was matching up at least somewhat to his story. There was some things that didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time, but like I said, we were just doing a howdy doody kind of check with it. We didn't have any information. We just wanted to go get his story and see if everything matched up. And for what he told me to what we found that day, everything did match up. It wasn't until later that we started unraveling a whole bunch of other stuff. So
What were some of those things that didn't match up that kind of made you wonder a little?
So one of the things for me was, it was a smaller property. So it was, sister had 9 acres, so it's a smaller property. It was grown up. There was a lot of like cattails and, CRP type grasses on the property that could have been, kind of like a bedding area. It was surrounded by, agricultural fields, corn and soybeans, that sort of thing. But it just, in my head, for a buck that size to go unseen, and stuff like that off a smaller property, it didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time. But then again, big deer get killed in weird places all the time, and that's one of the ways that they do get big. So, you also have to kind of take that into consideration. It wasn't a typical area that you see a real big deer get killed, but at the same time, they get killed in sometimes bizarre places, and that's how they are able to get big, is hiding out in these little, hidey holes.
Gotcha. So what transpired from there?
Well, it was a couple weeks later, around November 30th, I had received a video sent to me, and this video showed a very large buck at the edge of a field along the woods. Couldn't see nothing else in the video. No real landmarks or anything, but I had another officer with me that day, and we looked at the video and was able to determine that it was indeed the same deer that CJ had killed, um, obviously beforehand because it was alive. So we kind of had an area given to us where this video was taken. So that day we went out there and kind of matched it up from the road and found there's a few identifiable, distinguishable trees in the background. And we were able to match it up and say, okay, this is the location the video was taken for sure. And that was what, 10 miles straight line from where he claimed he'd killed it. So at that point, we knew we had something going on.
Yeah, you had red flags because 10 miles and no one's seen this deer, and somebody should have tripped on a trail camera somewhere along the way.
In the area that this deer was filmed, it's known for big deer. It's close to the city. I mean, the deer don't have no reason to leave there.
Right. It's interesting you talked about, the habitat and the different types of trees. That was a key thing in this investigation, wasn't it?
Yeah, for what we did in the field, once that daylight picture, it took a while for a daylight picture to come out, but we had that daylight picture of the buck laying there dead on the ground, and we kind of looked at it, and there was one branch log and one honeysuckle stick, and I mean, there wasn't much to go off of other than the leaves on the ground and those two sticks. But
And maybe, Matt, I'm jumping ahead too much, so I guess we're gonna get there. But I just I like the fact of how you guys looked at the habitat and matched habitat, and very, very important in a lot of cases, especially when you have a diversity of it in certain things. So, well, I guess I'll bring you back to where we were. You got the video. Now you're really suspicious, 10 miles away, and
I think it was, yeah, that same day somebody had sent me a link to the podcast, the original podcast that he did, and so that was basically what we did for the rest of that day, that night. I mean, we listened to that podcast, and it was, I think, December 1st. We went back into the field. Several of us officers. We decided, we're going to start on this one area close to where the video was taken. We've had problems over the years in the past there. It'd be the most logical place for somebody to sneak into a property. And we kind of decided, let's start here. And I mean, I guess we kind of hit it pretty quick there, knocking on some doors, getting permission to walk. And our supervisor actually talked to one property owner, and they said, oh, yeah, go look. But by the way, there was this truck parked here back in October, and they were seen taking a bag of corn in the woods. So, yeah, I mean, we knew what truck Corey drove, and it was the same type of truck, and ended up figuring out it was, in fact, the same truck, and it was him out there. So we had at that point, I mean, right off the get-go, we had a great starting point.
Definitely had a pretty good lead, to kind of help bring it all together. Of we had the video of the deer being in the field, but then at this point we had Corey's vehicle in the immediate area as well. So it just started help getting the puzzle pieces to kind of line up, and that way we knew we were getting closer to the truth at that point. So we just started going back in the area and trying to see what other pieces of the puzzle we could come across. When we were walking the one property there, we did come across a bait site. It was pretty significant in size. I mean, I'd probably say 10-foot diameter. So you could tell that the deer had been feeding there regularly. This and that, and having talked to the landowners already at this point, we already knew that none of them allowed any hunting in the area. So we knew that this shouldn't be going on in general. We also found a branch zip tied to one of the trees to act as a licking branch. So that was another thing that was just, out of the normal. for what should have been there.
We found empty bag of corn that day also.
Yeah, the feed sack for sure. So, you know, at this point, we just, you know, started to go back into the area and just, you know, really just start picking it apart, seeing if we could find any other anomalies, stuff like that. You know, it was over a several day span of us just going back in there, finding different things, um, as far as that goes.
Found branches that were cut, like shooting lanes, and I think those kind of looked like possibly even the year before, the ones we found.
They were
not-
they were a little bit older for sure. Absolutely. So, I mean, at this point, you know, we were starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Um, Matt had found some orange string that was on the ground at that point. At the time, we didn't know what it was a part of or anything like that, but it was just one of those
It's out of place for sure.
anomalies, yeah, that shouldn't have been there type thing. So, you know, ultimately, it was just kind of putting those pieces together, and
It's hard to put those together. I mean, we're talking what, probably 3 weeks after the initial kill. I mean, that's a challenge, you know. The more time that gets separated from the actual crime, it's a real challenge to find this types of evidence. And
Yeah, you're not going to find the blood, the drag marks. I mean, all that's gone. So
for sure, absolutely.
a little bit of hair left by the drag mark. Yeah, so you guys are really looking for some key things. That string, you know, very important. And I'm sure you're grabbing everything that you could, you know, the bag of grains to try to match that, and everything you could. So that's good work on that. Good work finding that.
yeah, I think it was about a week later that that daylight photo we talked about earlier got released on Facebook, and that's when, you know, we could, like I mentioned, you could see the one log at the bottom had some moss on it, and the honeysuckle branch, then the honeysuckle leaves, pawpaw leaves, kind of gave us an idea of where that deer was killed, and it was, we went back in and looked around further. I think trail camera photos got released about that time.
Yeah, it was around that time that there was a trail camera photo that had been released, and a video. It was in the nighttime, but you could definitely tell it was the deer that CJ had killed. You know, it we tried to kind of
We were looking for
figure
that
that out and stuff like
spot,
that.
maybe where the camera was, but we're talking a nighttime photo with a little bit of weeds in the background that we were trying to match up a month
For
later.
sure. So, you know, we tried to look for that, but it was just there wasn't a lot that was given in the video as far as you know, where to look and stuff like that. And so we kind of just started focusing on that daylight photo, and knowing that you know, a deer like that probably didn't go too far. It had to be somewhere relatively close right there. It has no hunting pressure, plenty of deer in the area. It's got all the food and water it could need. So we just really started picking that area apart. And while we were doing the investigation, we got to the area. It was actually right behind in the wooded area where that video was taken of the deer. And we just started, you know, looking around in that area, and we noticed that, you know, there's pawpaw trees, there's honeysuckle bushes, all in this area. In
Maybe
the
like not even a quarter of an acre. I mean, just a small area there that's
for sure,
a lot of pawpaw.
it was a thicker area too, and we kind of
I've
talked.
been through there before and seen some big rubs in there, and kind of, we need to check this out.
For sure. Yeah, and it definitely looked like, you know, a bedding area. We jumped plenty of deer out of there that had been bedding, and, you know, we kind of thought, you know, a deer that might have been hit poorly. We knew it had been hit poorly based on, you know, the pictures that we had seen and stuff like that of how the deer had been hit. We knew it was in a bad area, so we thought it might be an area where a deer might go bed down to die at, and so we just started to grid search the area to see if we could find anything out of the ordinary. And we started working through, and we got close to the field edge there, and, you know, Matt found 2 bags of ice, that was
Yeah, we kind of,
stuffed underneath a log. And
there is a landfill close, but we started looking at them, and bags weren't ripped open, and you could tell it just they'd melted out, and we had a good feeling at that point that we were in the right spot.
yeah, we were definitely getting close.
Kind of started digging through there, trying to find a piece of deer hair stuck underneath there. And Isaiah kind of just started working around that area, and it wasn't a few minutes, and he said, "Hey, come here, look at this." And
Yeah. So, Matt's looking at the bags, just trying to find, any evidence that we can have. Off of that, like we said, it was a good period of time after the deer had been killed. There wasn't a whole lot of evidence to go off of as far as, blood or anything like that. So he's looking at that, trying to find any deer hair or anything on the bags that might, be able to confirm that this is a part of this deer. And so I kind of wandered off and just started looking in the immediate area, and I just came across this log. And I'm looking at my phone with a picture of the daylight picture of the deer, and looking back at the ground. I'm like, okay, that kind of matches up. And then see the honeysuckle branch, and the shape of it matches up. And I'm trying to compare the distance, and I'm thinking in my head, I need to be right before I call him over. I don't want to call him over and be wrong. So, I start comparing the two, and I'm like, man, this looks right. So I'm like, I got to find something else on the ground to really just confirm it. And I saw some deer hair on the ground in the immediate area. And so at that point, I called Matt over and I said, hey, I think this is exactly the spot where the deer had died. And so he comes over, and we're discussing it and comparing it to the picture. Everything's
not much to go off.
No, it really is not.
Maybe a little section of a dark colored rotten log that's got this distinctive pattern of moss growing on it.
Yeah,
we're sitting there trying to line everything up.
Yeah, and at the time there was another branch that came off the honeysuckle, and it had a little fork on it, and it was broke off at the time. So that was the only thing that really didn't match up. And when Matt came over, he noticed that it was laying on the ground, and so he picked it up, and it fit perfectly into the break of the honeysuckle branch there. So we're looking at it, and the leaf litter is matching up. There's deer hair, the honeysuckle branch matches, the log with moss on it matches, and we're feeling very confident that this is the spot. And Matt's like, hey, there's a knife right there. So we find this knife. It has deer hair on it. So I'm looking at it, and then he goes, there's another knife. So there's two knives that were laying right there. That both of them had deer hair on it. So, we were really starting to get excited at this point of, it's starting to make sense. The pieces are coming together
at that point.
Yeah, I'm getting fired up with you guys just by I've been there as you start to peel back that, it starts with that little one, and looking at that branch in that picture, the comparisons, the little jagged edge on the bottom, I'm like, that's like a fingerprint. That's like perfect. You can't make that up in nature again. That's it. And then when I saw it, I'm like, that's it. That's the one. That's the perfect one. And when CJ, it's kind of interesting. He's probably getting pressured from everybody else. He's killed what potentially is the third largest typical buck in North America, and everybody wants to see pictures, and then they're starting to question, why aren't there daytime pictures? Why aren't there more pictures? Or so he's having to release it because he's getting a lot of pressure on the other side. So he releasing stuff that you guys can use in your investigation, basically.
Yeah, and we never contacted him since that initial contact. We just kind of worked on our investigation in the quiet there.
We were definitely trying to keep it,
We were getting a lot of calls from the public. Hey, this don't sound right. Listen to this podcast. And it's like, but nobody gave us anything to go off of until, we got that video for sure.
We work on facts and evidence. It's, not speculation. And that's the tough part. You can have that gut feeling. You can believe that somebody did something wrong, but we have to work on facts and evidence. And you guys have now developed some serious evidence and putting that all together. The key was the anonymous drop of that video. That's the key. When you saw that buck alive 10 miles away, and then you guys are like, okay, now that's getting a little extreme. Isaiah had it from the beginning. He was like, yeah, this isn't your typical spot, but it's possible. So it was already in the back of his head. And then that certainly sealed 10 miles away as the crow flies. And nobody's got it on their trail cameras and nobody's seen it in this 9-acre piece. Possible, but the probability drops drastically. So from there, we got some evidence. So where do you guys go from that point?
I think at that point we were working on warrants at the time, and at that point we felt we had enough that we were told, let's go talk to him now. So it was, I think, just a few days later that we kind of set up an interview project where, you know, we all went to each of these different people and talked to them all at the same time. And I was not with CJ, but I mean, he had through the interview there, he admitted to everything. And Corey didn't, but yeah, so we, at that point in time that night, we seized evidence. We found the antlers were somewhere else. They were at another location. We sent officers over there to get the antlers. And yeah, that was it for that. And then we waited on our warrants to come back in. And
At this point, he had sold the antlers, right?
yes,
So,
collector or something. Yeah.
right. For a large amount of money. And we're going to cover that certainly in the next episode where we really get the nitty gritty down. But yeah, so he sold, the thing, and from all the text messages and stuff, it sounds like this was really about money. So I find, in my experience, guys, and you tell me I'm wrong, it's usually about money or bragging rights when it comes to poaching, or filling your freezer, and that is less and less nowadays. It's less and less the poacher hunts to fill his freezer. It's more about a bragging right, or it's about money, and that's, for right now, from my perspective, and I think the general public, you sell those antlers, it starts to become about money. And I'm sure, through the course of your investigation, it started to look like that as well.
For sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're talking a deer that magnitude, you're not shooting a deer like that just to feed yourself. And there's the area that we're talking about. There's so many deer in the area. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for Matt and I to see 25, 30 deer every time we went back there to just look for evidence or anything out of the ordinary. So, I mean, the area has a lot of deer in the area. So, I mean, if it was, something where he was wanting to just kill some deer for the freezer, he had plenty of other opportunities to do so besides just targeting the one specific deer like he did. It wasn't throughout the investigation. We saw videos and pictures of, deer that he'd passed up on because they were so focused on killing this one specific one. So, it was a lot of good investigation work that went around to be able to put all the pieces together and figure this all out.
And we even went back to his sister's property, after this, just to, confirm and look at it again, right? All you got's a fence row down there, and there's no pawpaws in a fence row, but we went out there to confirm, and there's some little honeysuckles, but
Yeah.
nothing like what the leaves we saw in the pictures, and it was obvious. But
Absolutely. And then, after we did the interview project with him, one of our other officers was able to receive a picture from one of his informants about, the second deer, or the deer that he had shot the year before.
2022.
In 2022. The 2022 season. And, the picture that got sent to him had the coordinates, or the location of where the picture had been taken. So we were able to go back out to the property and confirm that as well, as the exact location of where that deer had been taken. And while we were out there that day, we went over and we were able to find the tree that he was hunting out of when he killed the big CJ Alexander buck. based off what he had told some of our officers during the interview project, we had a real good idea of where exactly he was hunting at. We were just able to confirm that of the exact tree that he was hunting out of. We were able to find the tree or bush that he had the camera on, that, you know, eventually all those pictures that were posted on social media were from him. And you know, we were able to find where the camera was located at that day as well. And you know, it was all coming together at that point.
And you were able to confirm a lot of this through the evidence you collected at the search warrant, and maybe share with our, you know, listeners and viewers about, you know, fish and game search warrants aren't usually, I mean, we go in and we want certain evidence, and it sounds like he was cooperating at that point and you were getting your evidence. And there's one thing that you guys mentioned that you got that he didn't even use. And I think that's kind of neat, because I had the same thing in a search warrant where the guy gave me the wrong gun because he didn't want to give me the gun he used to kill the deer at night because it was a good gun. So he gives me a piece of junk gun. So if you just kind of review that, so, you know, people kind of get an idea what a fishing game search warrant is, because I think it's the same in New Hampshire as in Ohio, as it probably is in Nevada.
Well, on the search warrant, I think we started off with, was that all cell phones? Cell phones. Yeah, go ahead. We got an investigator here.
The search warrant was geared around searching for the evidence of the crime. And what we had probable cause to believe was at his residence at the time, being is the antlers, the crossbow, tree stands, any of the equipment that he used, and the cell phones also, because we knew he was using a cell phone. He had his cell phone with him. We had pictures of, obviously, the dead deer out there during the daylight. So we had enough to go to a prosecutor, to go forward to a judge to get that warrant signed. And then the evening on, I think, the 22nd, is when we executed that warrant and spoke with CJ at that time.
Yeah, because all that information, especially the cell phone information, kind of connected a lot of dots, as well as bringing the suspects in, maybe even more so, so to speak, you know, the people that helped him do that, because he had back and forth with that as well. So kind of solidified those cases a little more.
Yeah, but I mean, even after, like I said, the interview, he can confess to it all, but then, you know, right back on the podcast, telling a whole different story. So, but we kept digging away at the, you know, the warrants and stuff, and I mean, we had a very solid case after going through all the records.
Right. And it's, you know, people that are listening to this don't know it, but if you go to the Wardens Watch YouTube channel, you guys are sitting right between you is the CJ Alexander buck and the buck that he took the previous year, the 2022 season, which are both incredible, you know, animals for sure. Yeah, it's amazing. And then you get some history of that area from that first one too. So that kind of puts him in that area prior to killing this, you know, what could be the third largest whitetail in North America. You know, it puts him in that area already, killing bucks illegally, because some of the violations that you guys charge is, you know, hunting without permission. And can you kind of go through the charges of everything, the baiting we talked about? You know, sometimes you know, we have evidence of it and we can't put it together unless they confess. And did he confess the baiting?
We don't have any rules against baiting other than on
You don't. Okay.
state property. You're not allowed to in Ohio, but on private property you are. But yeah, I mean, on this one, the 150 inch, he didn't have a license or a tag at the time we found, and bought one after he killed it. This deer here, a lot of our violations were obviously multiple times of hunting without permission. Remember what all the charges were?
Some of the note ones, hunting without permission, and then after the harvesting and during the staging, the falsification, theft by deception. He marketed this deer. He sold parts of this deer to various people, profiting on this deer. And when he profited from it, he's selling a false narrative that this deer was legally taken. And that's the reason they wanted parts of this deer and stories of the deer, because it was such a magnificent deer, they wanted to market it. And unfortunately, the way it was marketed, it's under false pretense. And that's where the theft by deception came in, how he, deceived these people to get to their money.
It's really not a whole lot of, actual wildlife charges on it. A lot of what happened
Was after the
was after the stuff that was done after to cover it up and lie.
And I will say most sportsmen don't understand if you make a false kill site or whatever, it's a felony. And we've charged that many a time. A felony of creating a false kill site, destroying evidence. That's all felonies in the criminal realm. Not so much, because we don't think of it as a wildlife crime, but I know in my career, numerous times of guys set up false kill sites because they did just like CJ did, killed it where they weren't supposed to, and carry it out and go to great extents to cover these things up. And then in this case, I mean, $10,000 for antlers like that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's a good payoff for a buck right away. And then you start selling your story. And then mineral people that think of growing antlers, they claim that they grew that deer with their mineral block. And, there's just one thing after another. So CJ was on his way to making a ton of money on this, for sure, because, it was such an epic, deer. So, and that's the route he was taking. And you're right. Those cases are all criminal, theft by deception, destroying evidence, creating false kill sites, and all of that comes down to a lot of serious criminal acts, and not so much on the fish and wildlife side, for sure. The interesting thing, you guys do, you have the trophy, that you got some serious fines out of this, and the trophy law that you guys have, I think it's really good. But you guys are known for trophy animals too. So I think that goes hand in hand. We don't have a trophy law in New Hampshire, but I don't think we're not known for any deer that grow like that. We got some nice deer, but not comparatively to the one you guys are sitting between. Can you talk about the law with the trophy law and that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's I can't remember when we started that. It's been several years, but it goes by the score on the deer, and there's all kinds of factors that they weighed in to come up with this calculation. But there's a calculation that you put in the score of the deer times this number, and it brings up the value of a trophy animal like this. But I can't remember. Was that 150 inch? You're looking around $5,000, something like that. This one was considerable.
Yeah,
35 or something. I mean, you can see the size of this deer. I mean, 150 inch deer is a very good deer, and this thing makes that one look small.
I know. It's just staring at it, I'm like just amazed at the genes you guys have out there in your whitetail lot.
I mean, there's a lot of value in something like this. Guys, hunt their whole life trying to get a deer like that or anywhere close to that.
Right. And there was people that had permission to hunt on this property, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's several properties right there. Most of them don't allow any hunting. There is a property that allows a couple people to hunt, but for the most part, this deer was off limits other than that one property.
Right.
Unless he crossed the road or headed out, but I don't think he did that much.
No, he had no reason to.
No, he was safe where he was at, so should have been.
Right. Gathering all this stuff and getting ready for trial. I mean, or did you guys have a lot to do that? Did you get deposed, things like that?
I didn't catch it.
Yeah. What was the position?
Getting ready for the trial. I mean, you got all the information, prepping for trial, because the plea came fairly close to the end. You guys were getting ready for trial, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, wasn't really much on us to prep for the trial. That was the investigators. So, I mean, they kind of, once we got to that point, they took over from there. And yeah, I mean, if it would have went farther, we would have had to start getting ready for the trial. But they did all the behind the scenes work for us and got all that worked out. But
yeah, you guys did some really, really good game warden work, is what you did. Just from knowing the ecology and knowing where those trees were, knowing the trees weren't where the deer was once you got a photo of that. I mean, and then, boots on the ground and just, like you said, searching in that grid style. It's tedious work. And not every case, do you find the string that connects it to the deer, the bags of ice, the knives, the deer hair. I mean, you guys, you
They
started.
left a little bit out there for us on this one. So that did help.
I think how many times you've been out there looking for something and you come up with nothing, and Isaiah goes and looks at that branch and says, "Is that the branch?" and starts studying it. And I could see him. I mean, he's like, I think, but you want to be sure before you call the other warden over. And he's like, "No, that's not it. Look at this, look at that." So you don't have egg on your face, but pretty exciting when you confirm and you're like, "Hey, come over here and check this out." It's one of the pictures I saw. There was a camel backpack with that stick in it, and then you guys put your backpack down in there so you really see it. And everybody looks at that picture, says, "Yeah, that's the stick man." Where it's found the stick, that's impressive work, gentlemen. I'm tickled pink that you did that, and hard work too. Hard work, tedious. And if you think about, with this case, there's all sorts of stuff going on the periphery. Social media is blowing up about this. You guys are doing your job. You're out there looking, and you can't talk about it. You can't tell everybody what you have, and they start speculating that the DNR is not doing their job. The DNR is not doing this. They're not doing that, and it sucks. It really does, being a warden. And this stuff takes time. You collect the evidence, you do the search warrants, and then you got to go through all the evidence. Going through phones. The investigators, I'm sure, took hours and hours and hours going through text, reading text to get what they needed off this stuff. So, but pretty good, basic game warden stuff, and then to hand it off. So we don't have investigators in New Hampshire. We follow it all the way through. So to the prosecution, even if it's except for the felonies, we would have to get our county attorneys involved in that. But it's a little different show. It'd be nice to have an investigator to say, "Hey, here's everything I found. Now it's your ball. Run."
That's right. It is nice to be able to hand it off sometimes. Sometimes we got to run it the whole way through, but some of this bigger stuff, they're glad to step in and help us. So
Absolutely. And I'm definitely glad that they were able to help us with this. Obviously there's a lot involved. Like you said, the hours and hours of phone records that they were going through to do all that. It was a big help for us. Obviously, crime didn't stop with just this one case. We had other things that we were doing at that point as well. And, having a good team of investigators to be able to help out with that was definitely huge, to just take this whole case all the way forward.
I mean, pretty much everybody that works down here in our unit, our area, I mean, they helped out at some time somewhere. I mean, there was all kinds of us working on this case.
Right.
But yeah, you talked about, all this on social media, and we can't get on there and defend what we're doing. We just kind of got to get beat up and sit back and take it till the truth comes out. But
For sure.
glad it finally came out and people can get the truth.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Whether it was on social media or even to us in general from the public, whether it was phone calls or running into people at the gas station, even of just people wanting to talk about this case or saying, why are you beating this guy up, or whatever else, and you just kind of have to sit there and take it and say, it's going to come out when it comes out. Like, it's an ongoing investigation. You can't really say much at the time, but knowing what we knew, even though we were getting beat around a little bit about different things that people were saying about our division and stuff like that. At the end of the day, we knew what we had. We were very confident in what we had, the evidence that we had for the case, and so I think that helped a lot. As far as you take it. At the end of the day, you kind of are hopeful of what the outcome will be based off what we have. So you just kind of keep going with it, I guess. So
From the beginning, he was the victim here. The mean old DNR was beating up on poor CJ after he killed this massive buck, and just because he killed a big buck, you wanted to take it away, and it was just, yeah, it was infuriating me to watch it for you guys, to the point where when your attorney general came out with his opinions and his charges, I had to weigh in. And CJ actually reached out to me and said some pretty nasty things to me about doing that. So because I think I was the first one to step forward and say, hey, that this is how we work. This is how game wardens work. We can't talk about it. We can say, hey, wait and see. This stuff takes time, when we get asked at the gas station. But it's tough keeping your mouth shut when you have all that building up and you know the truth. You want to tell them the truth, but you can't tell them the truth till all the I's are dots, the T's are crossed, and then it's ready to present, and it's gone through the right channels, because you could jeopardize a case by saying something, and that's the last thing you want to do, is jeopardize your case when you've worked so hard for it, and do that. So, but in the end, when it gets out in court and then those things roll out and people see the truth, I think it, for those people that criticized you, I hope they put you up another notch, because they were like, hey, I screwed up. I should have, held my tongue until the end and seen how it came out. There were some other people, some of the podcasts I've listened to, there was some serious speculation on their part, which was great. That they weren't buying it, everything. They weren't saying it, but they weren't buying it. You could tell, which helped, I think, in some of the world of the sporting, the hunters and stuff like that. So, it's amazing. I got this statistic, hunting drives 866 million in Ohio. That's how much the sport of hunting drives in Ohio. And when you talk about, it's either about, clout or money, and this was about both for sure. He shot an epic buck. He poached an epic buck. I shot it. He poached it. He knew it was there. He poached it. He was doing it for his own personal glory, his own personal gain, to sell those antlers, to sell his story, to start telling his story, the fame. And he got jail time for this, which is, it's different. The jail he got was a little different. It's kind of a halfway house, I would describe it. But still, he's got to go. He's got to report. He's got to stay there for like 6 months and get rehabilitated, which I don't think is a bad idea. For sure. Certainly, certain people that start lying in this case and start, doing things like that need a little rehabilitation. So to get some time is pretty important. So I think you guys got to be proud of what you did and the outcomes.
We are, yeah. Did you want to go over some of the restitution scores? And
I have the numbers there on the restitution. The top tier there is $4,625. And the bottom tier was restitution at $35,071.73. And that formula, if you're interested, is the gross score, which is 244 and 6/8. Subtract 100, and that gets squared, and then times by 1.65, and then the NIM value is to that, which derives that number, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah. Well, that's $35,000. I won't round it, or I could round it, I guess, but $35,000 for the CJ Alexander buck was the fine for killing that trophy animal, and that was an Ohio record for restitution, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And let's face it, that's an Ohio record there, so it should be an Ohio record for restitution as well. As far as Ohio deer come, would that have been like the biggest buck shot in Ohio with a crossbow?
I mean, yeah, it was potentially it had the potential to be the new state record, typical whitetail deer. Obviously there was some debate on, whether or not it was a typical, or non-typical based off, the common base issue with the G2 there on the left side. But, it's a magnificent deer either way you look at it, whether you look at it as a typical or non-typical, or however you look at it, it's, almost a once in a lifetime type deer, for someone to run across. So.
Yep. No, good work, guys. Yeah, because unfortunately, it's going to be probably the Ohio state poached record deer for a long time. And it's just not fair to the hunters out there that this stuff happens because it's stealing. They stole it, from somebody else potentially to have that pride. And generally we can tell when somebody shot that and made that. So, yeah, it's very unfortunate that an Ohio treasure was stolen from somebody else. Yeah. But no, anything else you guys want to say in closing?
I think we covered a good bit of it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the really good game warden work you did.
Thank you.
Very impressive. I think every, ethical hunter, sportsman, woman out there really appreciates the work you do, and we're on their side. We're definitely, and sometimes we got to be, a little forward to find out some of the facts here, but certainly we're on their side. We believe in what we do. We're passionate about it, and you guys have proved it with this case. And
We
that
like to hunt and fish too. I mean, that's why we do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I could have shot that buck. I would have been shaking too much if it ever stepped out in front of me. So, but no, thanks for joining the Wardens Watch podcast, giving us the game warden side of the case, and I really appreciate that, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. Thank you for having us. We